I'd like to look at the situation in the United States in more detail, because there is not much time left before the election. This is a key historical date that is important for us, for the world, and for the United States. At least it is considered so. The former U.S. National Security Advisor in the Trump administration said that if Kamala Harris wins the election, Trump will not accept the result. John Bolton said that we should be prepared for this. I look at this situation from two sides. Either it is true and there will be some unrest, or it is just a PR move before the elections to attract attention and create a smokescreen. I'm interested to hear your analysis. You know, man, I think that unfortunately this election cycle in the United States is not going to end peacefully. We see that the distance between the candidates is still within the sociological margin of error. For example, 2 or 3 weeks ago, Kamala Harris was ahead, and various sociological companies in their research indicated percentages that ranged from 3 to 5 to 6%.
Kamala Harris, десь по-різному, різні кампанії, соціологічні, різні дослідження, кажуть, там від 3 до 5-6% навіть було. А зараз...
After Trump started actively traveling around swing states, giving a lot of speeches and talking to people, they say he has tightened up. Now we're back to the state that we were in around the time of the debate between Trump and Kamala Harris. It's hard to say for sure who has the advantage in this election campaign. You see, the thing is, each of these candidates has their own pros and cons. In the past, according to classical political canons, we could talk about the radical advantages of globalists and Democrats, as well as Republicans who looked more inward to the United States and pursued a pan-American policy. But now this difference, which allows us to determine the key courses of the candidates, is very blurred. Trump has to talk about foreign issues: Russian Federation, assistance to Ukraine, NATO, the European Union, and of course China. And Kamala Harris and the Democrats, since elections in the United States are usually domestically oriented, talk about domestic issues. Even the current president of the United States won the last election cycle in 2 states that were previously Republican. Now that he is paying attention to the development of the military-industrial complex, and thus accelerating this cluster of the economy, he has also strengthened some democratic influence on arms manufacturers, which have traditionally acted as both sponsors and political support for Republicans. All of this suggests that the situation is rather complicated, and there is not much clear division between the candidates' programs. As we can see, the presidents choose their respective vice presidents, both Vance and Walsh, to balance and also to express radical positions. Because of this, their positions have become even more rounded, and even because of the vice presidents, they have become similar to each other. The only thing is that Kamala is a more systematic candidate, one might say, more classical. She is still in the position of the current vice president and looked more convincing during the debate. As I predicted in our conversation, there will certainly be no further debates, and so it happened. Trump, on the other hand, has traditionally relied on the protest electorate and opposition forces. He is more colorful, appetizing, and media-oriented. This focus on radical opposition protest sentiment, by the way, is what brought him to the White House last time. I would like to remind you that he was not predicted to win then, and he won only by electoral votes, although he lost in the popular vote. Now Trump is betting on the same thing he did last time, on radical forces.
які одні були, як я і прогнозував, буквально в нашій бесіді, десь приблизно місяць тому.
Who participated less in sociological surveys and focus groups.
Ну, відповідно, так воно і сталося. А Трамп, в свою чергу, класично є...
Will support him in the format of a protest mood against the current administration.
Опозиційні сили, в принципі, ну і він більш яскравий, більш епатажний, більш орієнтований на медійність. І, до речі, ця орієнтованість на радикальні опозиційні протестні настрої і привела його минулого разу в Білий дім, я хочу нагадати. Тому що навіть тоді, минулого разу, йому не пророкували перемогу. І він...
He hopes that these voters will come to the polls more than expected. Your question should be answered through this prism.
Зараз і робить він ставку на те, що і робив десь приблизно минулого разу. На те, що не прораховані соціологами радикальні сили, які менше приймали участь в соціологічних дослідженнях та фокус-групах, просто щоб підтримати, точніше навіть не підтримати Трампа, а от підтримати Трампа в форматі...
I think that given the stakes, which are extremely high for Trump right now, he is well aware that he has a lot of claims from security agencies. Now he has a simple choice. Either he wins this election or he doesn't recognize the results.
Що дійсно, я думаю, скоріш за все, враховуючи ті ставки, які зараз є надзвичайно високі для Трампа, що він чудово розуміє, що в нього ще велика претензії до нього з боку правоохоронних.
Perhaps he will organize Capital II. Now, across the United States, law enforcement officials, especially in undecided states that may vote for Trump, are working on possible provocations by radical Trump supporters.
Тому зараз по всім Сполученим Штатам уже правоохоронці, особливо по невизначеним штатам, або по штатам, які, скажімо так, можуть проголосувати за Трампа, які класично вважаються демократичними, вже працюють...
This is really being discussed in the expert community, and not just among analysts. If Trump announces that he has won the election on election day, it could be a false start and a Trumpian technique.
Є такий сценарій, і він обговорюється в експертному середовищі, серед аналітиків, що якщо Трамп саме в день виборів, підкреслюю, в день виборів, до цього нічого не буде, тому що тоді стане зрозуміло, що це фальстарт, і це була...
You see, on the day of the election, when the turnout is reaching its final stage, a few hours before the polls close, or even after they have closed, during the recount, Trump will probably announce that he won the election, regardless of the result.
Закриття дільниць. Ну, можливо, після вже закриття, під час перерахунку, вже Трамп, звичайно, з великою вірогідністю буде оголошувати, що він ці вибори виграв, відповідно, незважаючи навіть на результат, друзі. От чому справа.
Last time, you remember, when Trump was constantly claiming in his rhetoric that his victory was stolen, but few people talk about it, in particular about the vote by mail. I think you remember this story, that there was a lot of manipulation, but he then filed many lawsuits, tried to defend the results in the courts, but lost everywhere.
Він намагався відстояти відповідно результати в судах, але він всюди програв. Тобто він в публічному суді не міг довести.
That is, he could not legally prove in a public court that there was indeed any fraud. I think that he will not step on the same rake twice. And now, given the really difficult situation with the law for Trump himself, and the fact that he is only talking about manipulation and fraud at the level of rhetoric, it is unlikely that he will be able to prove anything in the courts. He will try to rely on public opinion, deepening the internal split in the U.S. society, increasing polarization, speculating on it, and maybe even bringing people out into the streets. So in fact, I expect very difficult scenarios in the United States. By the way, I will immediately answer the question of those people who say that a civil war is possible. No, of course, there will be no civil war. This issue had already been discussed within society about 2 months before the election, and we came to the conclusion that it was not worth the candle, and we should not make things worse for ourselves to warm up any of the candidates or political parties. Remember, there was even a movie about the Civil War in the United States, and then everyone saw clearly that this was a very bad story and a very bad prospect. Even if Trump has a great desire to do something like this, I don't think the masses will go for it. They even conducted sociological research among Democratic and Republican voters to find out who would be ready to defend the result if it was needed, say in a violent scenario. Sociology has shown that for Trump, this is up to about 30% of voters, but somewhere around 25%, if I'm not mistaken, and for Democrats, this percentage was quite insignificant at 11%. But do not think that if, say, Trump wins, Kamala Harris will not protect her interests. As a former prosecutor, she knows how to work with the law, and she will also challenge the results in the courts. Given all these factors that we have discussed, I am not sure that on January 20th we will see the inauguration of the future President of the United States. This may occur due to regulatory and legal issues, as well as litigation that could significantly affect the outcome and lead to a postponement of the inauguration. Thus, the United States is on the verge of an existential choice, and the whole world is closely watching this election. The key reason for this attention is not out of sporting interest or betting in bookmakers. This is because each new occupant of the White House will negotiate the terms of cooperation with other countries. And not only friends and partners such as Israel, Europe, NATO, Britain, Australia, Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines, but also enemies who also place their bets. The countries of the so-called Evil Belt, as they are called in the United States, including the Russian Federation, Iran, North Korea, and China, are also betting on different candidates. If we assume that the Russian Federation believes that it is more profitable than Trump, then, for example, Iran, which is a military partner of Russia, is betting on Kamala Harris as they benefit from the continuation of the nuclear program.
Але і вороги, тому що вони також відповідно роблять свої ставки, і країни так званого пояса зла, як їх називають в самих Сполучених Штатах.
They once talked about this with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and they do not want an unpredictable Trump who can destroy all their agreements. That is, the enemies of the United States have united in a common position of wanting to destabilize the United States, which in turn will strengthen it globally and unleash the hands of the Russian Federation, China, Iran, and others. However, to say that they all support one candidate and do not support another is not true. Unfortunately, there is not much time left, and I would like to clarify this point. You said that 25% of the voters are ready to support Trump by force. And if you compare it to some country where people don't have so many weapons in their hands, 25% is not that much. But here, 25% are people who can carry assault rifles of various calibers and other weapons. No, I was just comparing it in the sense that Trump's voters are much more aggressive, radical, and determined. And indeed, some of them are ready to go armed to defend Trump's position, whatever it may be. I emphasize that the presence of weapons can influence the situation, even if it is 25%, but armed. Maybe something will catch fire. No, in fact, this is the whole point of caution. I have already noted from the beginning of our broadcast that this threat is taken seriously, both in the White House and in the United States security forces. In states where there are suspicions of radical networks, this situation is also important.
Ні, просто я ж порівнював це в тому сенсі, що виборець Трампа, він набагато агресивніший, радикальніший, налаштованіший, і що вони дійсно готові, частина з них, іти зброєю в руках відстоювати на позицію Трампа, якою вона не була, розумієте?
Я до питання громадянської війни саме, що от наявність зброї може радикально вплинути, навіть там ці 25%, але озброєні, ну, можливо, щось і спалахне?
Ні, ну так направду в тому-то вся і пересторога. І навіть я вже
I have already realized that Trump may announce something to make everyone ready for destabilization.
Дуже серйозно до цієї загрози ставляться як в Білому домі, так і відповідно в селі.
But I emphasize once again that this inoculation of the negative scenario of a possible civil conflict has most likely already been made, and society has already discussed this issue.
Також я вже розумію, є у Трампа після такого, скажімо, часу які може Трамп оголосити, щоб відповідно всі були готові до такої дестабілізації. Але ще раз підкреслю, друзі, що скоріш за все оця прививка негативна.
There have been a lot of publications, a lot of domestic talk shows where this issue has been raised, and I will tell you that in about 95% of cases, even radical parties with different positions come to the conclusion that they need to sit down at the negotiating table and come to an agreement within the legal framework. So Trump will definitely escalate the situation. Trump will not, let's say, lose quietly by shaking hands with Kamala Harris, and he will do everything possible to gnaw out his result, regardless of the fairness of this process. That's why we're watching the U.S. elections. The whole world is watching, and for good reason.
Потиснувши руку Камали Харріс, і він буде робити все можливе для того, щоб відповідно вигризати свій результат незалежності від справедливості цього процесу. Тому за виборами Сполучених Штатів слідкуємо ми, слідкують весь світ і недаремно слідкують.
Because you can expect completely different scenarios. Oleksiy, thank you for the explanation. It was good to see you. Thank you for taking the time. Have a nice day and good luck. Oleksiy Buriachenko, political scientist, executive director of the International Association of Small Communities.